Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive back into Clausewitz with me?
Absolutely. Always ready to get back into On War. It's one of those books you can return to again and again and always find something new, some little detail you missed before.
Totally agree. And today we're tackling something that seems pretty straightforward at first glance, but as we'll see, Clausewitz finds all kinds of depth. We're looking at rivers as military obstacles.
Yeah, you might be thinking, rivers, don't we have, like, satellites for that now? But Clausewitz, even writing back in the 19th century, he had some surprisingly relevant insights on how rivers can make or break a military campaign. And a lot of that wisdom, it still holds up today, even in our age of drones and cyber warfare.
Right, it's not like the terrain just disappeared on us.
So to any of our listeners out there who might be deployed near a river, Clausewitz has some advice for you, or at least some things to think about as you plan. And what's so fascinating is how he goes beyond just the obvious, like rivers are hard to cross, which, okay, yeah. He digs into the strategic implications, how a river can be both an asset, A&D, a trap, all depending on how well you understand it.
And he makes it clear right off the bat that not all rivers are created equal. Trying to defend a massive river like, say, the Rhine, that's a whole different ballgame than a smaller river, especially one with, like, a deep valley around it or something.
Totally different. I mean, imagine trying to defend the Mississippi River versus, say, a smaller, faster river. The tactics would be completely different.
Yeah, it makes you think about different conflicts throughout history and how the terrain played out.
Absolutely. The geography of a region and its rivers, that shapes everything.
So how does Clausewitz break this down? Where do we even start with rivers in warfare?
Well, he uses this really striking analogy. He compares rivers to hard and brittle metal.
Hard and brittle metal. Okay, I kind of see where he's going with
So
it.
they can hold strong, right, under pressure. But once that defense cracks, boom, it shatters. No going back. It's that decisive, huh?
Exactly, and I think that image really captures the all-or-nothing nature of certain river defenses, especially when we're talking about large rivers and what Clausewitz calls direct defense.
Direct defense meaning, sorry to back up, just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
No, good call.
Yeah.
Yeah, direct defense basically means you're trying to stop the enemy from crossing at all costs. You're making that river your line in the sand, and you're defending every inch of it.
Okay, so full-on defense, hold the line, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and Clausewitz gets surprisingly in the weeds with it.
Yeah.
He has this whole detailed calculation he lays out, factors in how long it takes to build a bridge under pressure, how fast troops can move across different terrain, how many soldiers you need per mile of riverbank.
Wow, so we're talking like actual math here?
Oh yeah, he gets really granular with it. And that's what I find so fascinating about Clausewitz. He's not just some armchair general spouting off vague theories. He's trying to give real practical advice, even if it gets a little complex. So it's like he's handing you this battle plan, but based on, well, math. Which honestly is pretty cool. He's taking this thing that seems kind of simple, a river, and showing how much goes into actually defending it.
Exactly, and here's where it gets even more interesting. He argues that with the right setup, on a big enough river, even a smaller force can hold off a much larger one. At least for a while.
Wait, really? So you're saying even if you're outnumbered, a river can be the great equalizer?
In a way, yes. But, and this is a big but, it all depends on whether the enemy can just go around you. If they can flank your position, that advantage disappears faster than, I don't even know.
Faster than a politician's promise after Election Day.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got to factor in those flanking maneuvers. So direct defense might work great on paper, but in the real world, it's a lot riskier than it sounds.
For sure. Which brings us to his other main strategy, especially for those smaller, twistier rivers, the indirect defense.
All right, indirect defense, hit me with it. What's the playbook there?
Think less about holding a line and more about setting a trap. Instead of trying to stop the enemy at the river itself, you lure them across, and then you spring the trap.
Ooh, okay, now we're getting sneaky. I like it.
Right. Clausewitz understood that a river, it's not just a barrier, it can be a weapon if you use it right.
So paint me a picture. What does that look like on the ground?
Imagine a force. They managed to secure a bridgehead. They think they're making progress, but they've just funneled themselves into this narrow valley, steep sides. Maybe their backs are literally against the river, limited options, nowhere to go.
And that's when the trap closes in.
Exactly. You hit them with everything you've got before they can even realize what hit them.
It's like one of those ancient battles where they get lured into a mountain pass and then ambush.
That's a great comparison, yeah. But in this scenario, the river itself, it becomes part of the trap.
Got it. So it's about using the terrain to your advantage,
Mm.
even turning what seems like an obstacle into a weapon.
That's Clausewitz in a nutshell. He wants you to see the battlefield differently, to think beyond the obvious.
This is reminding me we should probably talk about how important speed is in all of this.
Well, for sure, if you're going to try an indirect defense like this, you have to be decisive. If you hesitate, if you don't strike hard and fast.
The enemy breaks free, regroups, and then you've just lost your advantage.
Exactly. Hesitation in this kind of maneuver, that's a killer, literally.
Man, it's like a game of chess, but with way higher stakes. You got to think several moves ahead, anticipate your opponent's actions, and be ready to adapt on the fly.
And that's where Clausewitz's real genius comes in. He's not just saying, do this, then do that. He's giving you this framework for thinking about war, this toolkit of concepts.
And part of that toolkit is understanding that it's not just about the river itself, right? It's about everything around it. The terrain, the lay of the land. That's just as critical, if not more so.
Absolutely. Remember those flanking routes we were talking about earlier? Those are crucial here. As are choke points, elevation changes. Basically, anything that dictates how the enemy can or can't move.
It's like, yeah, we have satellite imagery now, we have drones, but you got to know the ground, you got to understand the nuances of the terrain if you're going to fight effectively.
Couldn't agree more. And that leads us to Clausewitz's third, and maybe his most audacious form of river defense. What I like to call the elegant defense.
Elegant defense. All right,
Yeah.
You've definitely got my attention. Lay it on me. What's the strategy there?
So with the elegant defense, instead of hunkering down on your side of the river, you take your strongest force and put them on the enemy side.
Hold on, did I hear that right? We're crossing the river, inviting them to our barbecue, but like with, bayonets.
Basically, yeah. It's bold, I'll give Clausewitz that. But by crossing the river, now you're the one threatening their supply lines, forcing them to fight on your terms.
Okay, I can see how that would really throw a wrench in their plans, having to defend their own backyard, plus deal with us right there on their doorstep.
Exactly. It's about flipping the script, keeping them off balance. But it's also a gamble, gotta be honest.
Yeah, I bet. So many things could go wrong, right?
Oh, for sure. It all hinges on how strong your force is,
Yeah.
where exactly you position yourselves, how the enemy reacts, which, let's be real, is never totally predictable.
And there's always that wild card, the unknown unknowns, as they say.
Always. So yeah, elegant defense, brilliant on paper, maybe, in practice, requires a certain leap of faith.
And a commander who's either really confident or maybe just a little bit crazy, huh?
Maybe a bit of both. But when it works, man, it's the kind of move that wins wars, not just battles, changes the whole game.
It's wild to think. Here we are talking about these concepts from the 1800s, and they still feel so relevant.
That's the thing about strategy, right? The tools change, but the underlying principles, those tend to stick around.
Totally. It's like Clausewitz is giving us this masterclass in how to think about warfare, not just what to think.
Exactly. He wants you to understand the why, not just the what.
Which brings us back to, I think, one of his other key points, the whole idea of feints and demonstrations.
Ah, yes. The art of the bluff.
So even back then, Clausewitz knew that sometimes just the illusion of strength that could be just as effective as the real deal.
Oh, yeah, especially when it comes to those river defenses. I mean, think about it. If you're the attacker and you see what looks like a heavily fortified river crossing.
You're going to think twice, right? Even if in reality it's all smoke and mirrors.
Exactly. You don't know what you don't know. And that doubt, that uncertainty, that can be enough to make you hesitate, change your plans, maybe even make a fatal mistake.
That's like poker, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes a well-timed bluff, that's what wins the hand.
100%. And the best part is, this idea, it's timeless. We see it throughout history.
Give me some examples.
Well, you've got those inflatable tanks they used to fool the Germans in World War II, right?
Yeah.
Pure deception, but it worked.
It's amazing how effective that kind of misdirection can be. And today, we've got disinformation campaigns online, all kinds of ways to manipulate what people see and believe.
Exactly. The methods change, the technology changes, but the underlying principle, it remains the same. You're messing with the enemy's head.
You're playing that psychological game, and sometimes that's what wins wars. It makes you wonder, with all the technology we have today, are we losing sight of that human element?
It's a good question, and frankly, one I don't have a good answer for. It's easy to get caught up in the latest gadgets, the whiz-bang technology.
But at the end of the day, it's still people making the decisions.
Right.
And people are, well, predictable in a lot of ways.
For sure. We're driven by emotions, by fear, by pride, all those things that Clausewitz understood so well.
And he doesn't just talk about it in the abstract. He gives concrete examples, like Napoleon's retreat across the Rhine in 1813.
Classic example. Napoleon, completely outmatched at that point, his army decimated.
So what's he do? He uses the Rhine to buy himself some time.
Right. He knows he can't hold the whole river line, not with the forces he has left. So instead of getting bogged down in a hopeless fight,
He stages this masterful delaying action, puts up just enough resistance to slow the enemy down, then makes a strategic withdrawal.
textbook example of knowing when to hold them, knowing when to fold them, to use a poker analogy.
But it's not just about retreating, right? It's about using that time, that breathing room, to regroup, to reassess, to come up with a new plan.
Exactly. Napoleon knew that the Rhine, even though he couldn't fully defend it at that moment, it was still a valuable asset.
He used it to shape the battlefield, to control the tempo of the campaign, even though, on paper, he was on the back foot.
And that's something I think a lot of people misunderstand about Clausewitz. They think he's all about brute force, about overwhelming the enemy with sheer numbers.
When in reality, he's much more nuanced than that.
Oh, way more nuanced. He understood that sometimes the smartest move is to retreat, to regroup, to live, to fight another day.
It's like that saying, the art of war is knowing how to lose a battle but still win the war.
Exactly. And Clausewitz, he understood that better than anyone.
And it's not just the physical act of crossing a river, right?
Yeah.
There's that psychological element too, that feeling of vulnerability, of uncertainty that can really mess with a soldier's head even before the first shot is fired.
Oh, absolutely. Clausewitz talks about this, how even for a larger, stronger force, a river can be this mental obstacle as much as a physical one.
It's like that moment when you're standing at the edge of a diving board about to jump. Your heart is racing, your mind is flooded with doubts, even though logically you know it's going to be fine.
And in war, that hesitation, that moment of doubt, that can be exploited by the defender.
You hesitate, you second-guess yourself, and suddenly you're the one on the back foot.
Exactly. And that's what makes Clausewitz so insightful. He understood that warfare, it's as much about psychology as it is about tactics and maneuvers.
It's about understanding how the human mind reacts under pressure, and then using that knowledge to your advantage.
Exactly. And that's a skill that's just as relevant today as it was 200 years ago, maybe even more so, with all the complexities of modern warfare.
It's easy to get caught up in the technology, the fancy weapon systems, the cyber warfare capabilities.
But at the end of the day, war is still a human endeavor. It's about people making decisions. And those decisions are often influenced by fear, by pride, by all those messy human emotions.
And Clausewitz understood that. He knew that to truly master the art of war, you have to master the human element.
He knew that battles were won not just on the battlefield, but in the minds of the commanders and the soldiers.
So as much as we've been talking about rivers as physical obstacles, I think the real takeaway here is that they represent so much more than that.
They represent a challenge, a test of will, a chance to outmaneuver your opponent, not just physically, but mentally and psychologically as well.
They force us to think differently about warfare, to see beyond the obvious, and to remember that even in the age of drones and artificial intelligence, the human element remains paramount.
Because at the end of the day, wars are won and lost not by machines, but by people. And that, I think, is the most enduring lesson we can take from Clausewitz.
Absolutely. Well said. So to all of you listening, whether you're a student of history, a military strategist, or just someone who's fascinated by the complexities of warfare, I hope this deep dive into Clausewitz has given you some new insights and perspectives to ponder.
And remember, the next time you see a river, don't just see a body of water. See it as Clausewitz did, as a dynamic element of the battle space, a potential weapon, and a window into the human heart of warfare.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the ideas that shape our world.